Hello. I'm now starting my video series about the Devas for Digimon Tamers. There's going to be 4 videos for this. Each one is going to go over 3 different Devas, and this first one is also going to include kind of an overview or a description of what the Devas are in regards to like their role within the series. Um, so, uh, in Digimon Tamers, that's where we're first introduced to them to a degree within the anime, although I do know that they tend to pop up later on in some of the other anime and in the video games and stuff like that. I'm just not super familiar with those other ones or not. So Deva, or Devas, depending on how you want to phrase it, are a group of 12 ultimate level Holy Beast Digimon that are derived from the Buddhist myth of the 12 heavenly generals, deities who were designated to protect. I'm going to mispronounce this name, and I apologize to anyone who's Buddhist and anyone that knows the correct pronunciation of this. Bayasaiji Yaguara? Sorry. So within the myth, the 12 heavenly generals are supposed to protect this specific deity, or the specific being within the signs, or within that is part of their job. They're also representative of the Chinese zodiac, and in Japanese Buddhism. So there's 12 devas. There's 12 heavenly generals, and there are 12 animals that are associated with the Chinese zodiac. And insert fruits basket joke here, because zodiac, animals, blah 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 blah. There's also a Jackie Chan Adventures jokes with the 12 talismans that is applicable here as well. I'm quite certain. So there's that. What can I say? I had to. Each of the devas within Digimon are all representative of a different animal, as in they each have one of the different generals that they are associated with and a different animal that they are associated with. The animals are pretty obvious given the fact that the devas look like these different animals. Throughout the course of the series, or the way that it's set up for the devas, is that their job is that they are these like very close followers of the Digimon sovereigns. It's usually, since there's 4 sovereigns, they each get 3 devas. Is generally the way that it's divided up, with the devas as their subordinates. And many of the devas share similarities. Beyond just the basics. Nearly all of the devas have 3 horns and red eyes in some form or another. They all wear these Chinese styled armor with red or purple scarves. I do not know if there's an exact meaning as to why red and why purple. I'm sure there is an exact meaning, but I'm just not sure of it, or why it's a specific color for a specific Digimon. And each of the devas wield different weapons that are just called Bow X. So it's like Treasure X. So it's just like blah blah blah, blah 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 axe, blah 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 this, blah 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 sword, blah 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 staff, however it goes. And they all just have like generic weapon types. Some of them even have similar ones. So their role within the Digimon Tamers series is kind of their origin, is that they are Digimon that were created by the Sovereign out of the data of deleted Digimon. So that actually answers, I guess, one of the slight questions I wanted to know, given the fact that I tend to reference the fact that there are a lot of, there's lots of Digimon that get destroyed throughout the Digimon Tamers series, and a lot of them get their data absorbed by Renamon or Terriermon or Guilmon, depending on stuff. And I kind of had the question of, well, where does the extra data go? Where does like the data that doesn't get absorbed go? Answer. At some point in time, the different sovereigns use their powers to create the devas from the deleted data. So I guess it kind of questions the fact of, well, were they initially designed to just protect the sovereigns? Most likely. Help protect the digital world, keep peace, possibly. Were they just fully formed into their final forms? Most likely. Kind of where they start coming into the story is that it's revealed throughout the whole course of the story that, obviously, I mentioned before that Calamon is this catalyst that has been given a Digimon form by a Zulongmon and sent to the real world. And then Chuchalmon wanted to have the Devas go and search for the lost entity, for the catalyst, and bring it back, as well as conquer the human world, since he just loathes the human world so much. And throughout the course of the series, many of them end up coming through. Initially, they are unable to because they are so powerful, but because of Yamaki, because of him activating Juggernaut against various Digimon invading, it actually makes it possible for the Devas to be able to enter the real world. And throughout the course of the series, there are Mihiramon, Sinduramon, Pajramon, Vajramon, Indramon, Makuramon, Kubihiramon, and Vikarlamon, so 9 of them, end up making their way into the real world, into Tokyo. They cause various forms of trouble. The one that actually ends up causing the most amount of trouble is Vikarlamon, since he's the one that ends up the board Deva. I mentioned him quite a bit. I'm going to go much more over these ones all a little bit more detailed as I go through the different videos. This is just the overview. And then, 8 of the 9 Devas are destroyed. Makuramon does manage to capture Calamon and make it back to the digital world, where he then, gives him to Chuchalmon after a whole bunch of different escapades that happen in that regard. During that time frame, also, we end up meeting Katuramon, who is the dog Deva, and we end up meeting Mihiramon, who is, I believe, the dragon Deva. And then, of course, the final one, and the only one that actually ends up surviving all the way through the end of the series, is Antilamon, who, of course, ends up becoming Lopmon, the Digimon partner of Susie, Henry's younger sister. Again, these ones are going to get much more information about them as I go through the different videos. And I'm kind of doing these in the order that they appear, or the order that really we end up finding out about them throughout the course of the series. So yeah, the only one that ends up actually surviving all the way to the end of the series is Lopmon. And, even though she's this disgrace, according to, Chuchalmon at that point in time, she still reveres him and everything like that. But she, of course, ends up going to Earth, and she ends up staying with Susie because Susie is her partner. But again, I'll go over much more of that. And if you want a lot more take on that, go look at my Susie video where I discuss that. So the 3 that I'm going to talk about today are Mihiramon, the Tiger Deva, Sinduramon, the Snake Deva, and Sandiramon, the Rooster Deva. So hence why I have a Torchic, a Tiger, and a snake. The wooden cobra that I have for some of the Alabasta videos does not appear well on camera, so I figured I'd do that. Plus, it's a different snake. So that was actually a rattlesnake. Stuffed. I'm not going anywhere near any real rattlesnakes. So first off, we have Mihiramon, who is the Tiger Deva, and he is the first Deva that the Tamers and Yamaki Hypnos end up interacting with. So basically what ends up happening is at one point in time, Yamaki activates the Juggernaut program in an attempt to eliminate all of the Digimon on Earth. It basically acts as, I think I may have described it at some point in time, or this was used in the series at some point as a definition of like a giant Digimon version of a bug zapper, where they just light up the 2 buildings that our Hypnos is comprised of, or where Hypnos is, and it just draws in all of these Digimon that are all these different various wild ones that have made their way into the real world. Gilmon goes into kind of his much more serious hunter mode. Terriermon and Renamon are, of course, very concerned about what's going on with this. Impmon and Calamon don't really seem to be all that affected by it. I think they're kind of like drawn to it a little bit, but they're not like fully drawn into it, since I guess they've had more time to adapt to being in the real world. And I don't know the exact definition of why they're not affected by it, but they're a bunch of the other Digimon are just drawn into this like vortex. And what ends up happening is, they're drawn in and they get destroyed. And this actually ends up causing a digital hole, or a large enough hole in the digital barrier between the real world and the digital world for Mihiramon to be able to biomerge. And he ends up, comes into the real world through the Hypnos Tower on top of it. And he ends up actually starting to torment Yamaki by just like taunting him and everything. And it's actually quite entertaining because, of course, as I mentioned in Yamaki's video, he is very arrogant at that point in time in regards to not thinking that Digimon are truly living things and everything like that. Want more of my opinion on how Yamaki changes, go watch the Yamaki video. It's a lot more interesting than just this. Or a lot more interesting than just me giving the Cliff Notes version here. And what ends up happening is, of course, Mihiramon is just kind of like taunting him, and fair enough, many of the Devas actually get some fairly good quotes that come with them one way or the other, or like in a quote that is associated with them. For Mihiramon, he has actually, his quote is actually kind of like, "Humans have created us, but now we are free. The time has come to claim our place in the real world. You who have been one who... You have but one purpose, to serve the Digimon." Many of the Devas are also quite arrogant in that regard. Not all of them. Much later on, Antilamon is an exceedingly arrogant, and there's a few of the other ones that are a little bit more of like on the humble side, but not too many of them. Most of them are very much... we are the servants of the sovereigns. It is our job to do what we must. It is our job to protect, to serve them, to retrieve this catalyst, and to cause as many problems in the real world as we can. Because this is what we are supposed to do. They are Digimon that have this very high and mighty attitude. Okay, fine. You can stay there then. I was wondering if anything was going to fall in the background. That thing was very precarious this morning when I set it up. Oh well. They're all fake swords, so it doesn't matter. And Mihiramon kind of taunts Yamaki and blah, 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 blah. And what ends up happening is sequentially, both Renamon as Cubimon and Terriermon as Gargamon end up going up and trying to fight him. And what ends up happening is they both get soundly defeated. And he's also like taunting the Tamers as he's doing this. And the thing is that Terriermon is actually kind of the one that figures out what happens, because both of them actually get hit hard enough that they almost get, digitized. They almost get deleted. We actually see their data like shiver and like almost fall apart. And, this is of course after, all of the Tamers, Takato, Rika, and Henry have all fully established their relationship with their Digimon and been able to actually fully, Henry, Rika is not as emotionally constipated when it comes to Renamon as she has been in the past. And Henry understands that sometimes they do have to fight. So they're all at that point in time, and Takato has gained a lot more confidence in his skill with Gilmon and as a tamer. And what ends up happening is Terriermon actually kind of figures out the way that Mihiramon fights. And it's actually, he waits for, he ends up like circling behind the Digimon and then attacking them from the back. So actually, this is a way of a lot of tigers tend to actually attack their prey. They will circle around and find like where their prey is facing away from them so they can sneak up on them. And then they will jump and land on them, and generally just go for the back of the neck to end it as fast as possible. That's generally the way that tigers tend to hunt anyway. But what ends up happening is when it's actually Growlmon's turn to go up and fight, Growlmon almost ends up getting deleted as well, but because him and Takato end up having this like heart to heart, because Takato and him are actually connected enough at this point in time that if Growlmon gets hurt, Takato kind of gets hurt as well. And I think Rika and Henry actually end up having a similar fashion of what ends up happening to them while they're fighting against Mihiramon as well, is that they feel the pain from their Digimon, which again just shows this much more, the stronger bond that they've all developed with their Digimon. And what ends up happening is Takato ends up getting a blue card, and he digivolves Growlmon to War Growlmon, and War Growlmon is actually able to defeat Mihiramon, and he's able to destroy him. And I don't remember if he absorbs him or not. I would have assumed he did, but I'm not sure. By this point in time, most of the Tamers Digimon have kind of stopped trying to absorb the Digimon that they end up fighting, so I don't think he did, but I could be wrong. And the two attacks that we kind of see Mihiramon use throughout the course of that episode, I don't think it's a two-part episode, I think it's just a one-parter. And he has Samurai Tiger Toe, which he just attacks his opponent with his tiger tail, or his tiger rod as it's referred to as, and Armored Tiger Tail, which means there's spikes that get added to it when he attacks. So that's what we get there for Mihiramon. I actually really like his design. I just like tigers in general, so yeah. Then we have Sandiramon, who is the Snake Deva. Fun fact, my mom was born in the year of the snake, if I remember correctly, from other things I've looked up. She does not like that. My mom does not particularly care for snakes, which I'm like, okay, fair enough. Fair enough. Sinduramon's appearance is based off of a cobra, which there's not really any cobras in Japan as far as I'm aware, and I have no idea if there's like cobras within China or not. Don't quote me on that. I don't know. I also like the fact that Sandiramon's weapon is like a giant rod with like a big spiky blade thing on the end, and if I remember correctly, he kind of vomits it up when he like summons it, so I'm like, he has hammer space, which is just funny. I just find that funny. I myself don't particularly mind snakes to a degree. I'm just more like, I will pet the ones that cannot bite me and kill me, because I've petted various boa constrictors and anacondas and stuff like that, and like hognose snakes and different things like that. But it's rattlesnakes, anything that's venomous, I'm like, nope, not going near you. So Sinduramon actually ends up biomerging in the subway tunnels in Shinjuku. And this happens while Rika and her grandmother, I believe, are down there. Because this is like just taking part after like Rika kind of spent part of the day with her grandma. And what ends up happening is, Rika and Henry are trying to deal with Sinduramon. I think Rika and Renamon kind of try to lure him away from where the people are. And then Henry and Terriermon show up and they start trying to attack it and everything and protect the different passengers on the train and all of that so they can escape. And what ends up happening is, of course, they're trying to get a hold of Takato, but Takato is at the park with their friends, with a bunch of his like school friends, showing them Guilmon. And then it's actually because of Ipmon going and taunting Takato, Ipmon's way of helping, I guess. He's like, hey, why are you here when your friends are running around having issues? And like, that's when Takato realizes, oh, there's something wrong. And he like, I guess his, Digivice starts going off and he starts trying to find where they are. And has Guilmon use Digmon's drill in order to like drill down through the park and into the subway where they find the battle going on. Takato and Guilmon, now Growlmon, join the battle with Cubimon and Gargomon, and the three of them, with a couple of modify cards given, are able to actually destroy Sinduramon. And doesn't really too much happen after that. They're able to defeat him and save the people that are on the subway and everything. Again, if this was happening today, everybody that was like, oh my god, there's a giant snake and a giant fox and a giant dinosaur thingy and a weird rabbit with guns on its hands. Where's my cell phone camera? They'd have that out instantly and be recording all of this. And Sinduramon's quote that kind of goes along with him, Sandiramon, excuse me, is prepare yourself to be conquered. We are the Digimon who refuse to be tamed by humans. We will rule your realm, and there is nothing you can do to stop us. The 12 Devas will destroy you all. I mean, given the circumstances, if I ended up meeting a giant snake in a subway tunnel that is like this giant freaking thing that is the size of the train, I would be like, I'm not going to argue with you, just please don't hurt me. Type of a thing. Particularly because I don't have a Digimon that can protect me. His weapon is Venom Axe is what it is, and as I said, he like coughs it up out of his body. And then I think he just swings it around. I don't remember. He like swings it around using his tail, which is clever. I don't remember if we actually end up seeing him doing too much else with it. And he seems to be a fair bit weaker than Mihiramon, given the fact that he was able to be defeated by 3 champion level Digimon, as opposed to Mihiramon that ended up having to be defeated by 1 mega level Digimon. So, yeah. Now we have the Rooster. Sinduramon. It's a giant rooster, which I find this one much more entertaining for a certain reason that you'll find out about in a second. So, and one of the things that actually ends up happening throughout the course of the section while they're dealing with the Devas is that Henry actually goes to his sensei and actually kind of asks him what he knows about the Devas, and he's like, he mentions like the 12 heavenly gods or, generals and stuff like that, and like they talk about that a little bit. And then, sensei is the one that points out that like, well, from our perspective, they can seem evil because they're coming in and trying to destroy us. But from their perspective, what they're doing is good because they're trying to protect their world from what we can do. So there's this like, the two sides to the same coin type of a situation. And what actually ends up happening is at one point in time, Henry, while he's walking around, he ends up seeing like a calendar for the Chinese zodiac hanging in the window of a shop. And he grabs it and he like, well, I think he asks if he can take it because he's Henry and he's very polite. He takes that and he goes and he shows it to Takato and Rika and he's explaining to them, and this is after they've encountered several of the different Devas, and he starts pointing out the ones that they've interacted with. And it's just like, the Devas are based off of the Zodiac, and we've already beaten, I think they may have been up to 4 at that point in time. So there's like 8 more to go. And they're like, oh, that's not going to be good. That's not going to be good to have to fight all 12 of them. Admittedly, they don't ever really end up having to fight Antilamon, so that kind of helps. So they technically only have to fight like 11 of them. But yeah. So in regards to Sinduramon, Takato, Henry, Terriermon, Gilmon, Calamon, and the rest of Takato's class are all off on a school camping trip. And what ends up happening is they end up seeing Sinduramon at first, and he doesn't seem to be all that threatening at that point in time. He's very small. In regards to his size, he doesn't look that much bigger than like a regular chicken. So they just kind of ignore it for the time being because they don't want to mess with it given they're on a nice little camping trip. And what ends up happening is Sinduramon then ends up like flying off and he ends up finding like a nearby city and he ends up absorbing the electricity from the city. And he gets bigger. And then I think it's the next day, Takato and Henry and their little group end up actually interacting with this. I love this. This detail is so adorable and I love it. They end up getting interacted with by this possessed owl, which is just a random owl out there in the woods. It's just like, it did not choose to have this happen to it. It has been possessed. And it's like its eyes are glowing red and it's like talking. And it's like talking in, I don't know how to describe it. I was just like, he's talking in like a hype man voice type of thing because he's basically the owl. This possessed owl is being the hype man for Sinduramon, or the hype owl, I guess, the hype bird. And he gives a speech. It was like, the Dave has arrived. Oh yeah, hail to the Dave. He who drinks of the light of man and expands himself and looks like a right big chicken. like a Southern hype man is what he starts acting like. And I love it. I love that quote. I love that moment of the episode. It's just so funny. Um, and like he's like hyping up the Deva, he's hyping up Sinduramon, and they're like, Takato and Henry are like, a right big, what the hell? And they end up figuring out that, oh, by the light of man, he means absorbing electricity. And, he looks like a right big chicken because that's what he is, a right big chicken. He's a right big rooster. And I just find that so funny. I don't know why, but I do. It's just hilarious. And they end up having to like chase him down because there's all these different blackouts that keep happening, and there's like this power plant nearby, and it's like, oh well, we got to stop him from getting to that, or else he's going to become just like so much stronger. Because the more electricity he absorbs, the bigger and stronger Sinduramon gets. And they end up like racing to. They end up having to like take a bus because like I think it's Growlmon and Gargomon are just like chasing after Sinduramon at that point in time in order to fight him. And Takato and Henry end up having to like get on this bus and like ride to where like they are. And they're able to defeat Sinduramon. And the possessed owl just kind of like snaps back out of it and goes back to normal and just like flies away. And it's like, yeah, I was like, and he looks like a right big chicken. I love that owl. It is so adorable. But admittedly, if I came across that in a forest, I'd be like, okay, who put the animatronic owl here? And then I'm like, oh no, it's not animatronic. I'm in trouble. Again, most of the Devas designs, I actually really like how they're like, you can tell that they're based off of different animals because Digimon in general, just like with Pokemon, are actually quite obviously based off of different animals. Some are a little bit more obscure. Some of them are, very much not based off of animals, but they have slight features of animals. And then there's ones that are just completely based off of like inanimate objects like ice cream cones and stuff like that. But the thing is that Digimon does the same thing as well. I think I mentioned in the video about Rika and Renamon that there was the whole controversy and copyright issue over the stuff with like Ninetales and Cubimon because they were so similar, even though they were both based off of kitsunes. With all the different Devas, they're all obviously based off of the different animals of the zodiac. Therefore, it's quite easy to figure out, oh, once you get the concept of what they're about, which is why I like in the series how Henry is like at one point in time, they're all based off of the different Devas. And as they keep interacting with them and keep defeating them, they kind of, I don't know if they keep marking them all off or if they're just kind of like keeping track of which ones they've actually defeated, so they kind of know how many more they need to keep an eye out for. And as I said, the only one that ends up surviving to the actual end of everything is Antilamon as Lopmon, and even then, she's not really a Deva anymore at that point in time. She's like deposed by Chuchalmon. Again, I'll go over that a lot more when I get to the last video for the Devas. As I said, there's going to be 4. The next one I will be talking about Pajramon, Vajramon, and Enduramon. So the sheep, the ox, and the horse. But that'll be in the next video that I'll do for these. So that's what I have. I still find the possessed owl so funny. I don't know why. I always found that funny even when I was a kid, and I still find it funny now. The Deva has arrived. I'm sorry. I'll stop now. So that's what we have for that, for the first Deva video. I hope you have a nice rest of your day, and I hope you enjoyed the video, and I thank you for watching. Bye.